Hello and welcome to the Dash podcast, episode 132. I'm Mark Mason and I'm joined by my fellow co-host and amigo, Joel Valenzuela. How's it going, Joel?
Very nice. Coming up on the weekend. Good time to be live.
You're looking very cozy there. Happy it's Friday? It's always good it's Friday.
Yes, I'm happy it's Friday.
Excellent.
Cool, of course. We get to all hang out. We get to have a little fun, friendly powwow with all our buddies. Do that for a living. That means any day we get to do that is a great day, and therefore Friday is a great day.
And speaking of buddies, our special guest for this episode is Kodaxx, aka Spencer, who is now a Dash investment supervisor. You've been on the podcast before, but you wasn't a diff supervisor. So welcome back to the podcast. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for having me, of course. It's like on the podcast is just an early jump to the after party for me. So,
so let's talk about the diff supervisor thing. So, like, how did that come about? So, why are you now a diff supervisor? For those just to fill in the gap for those that just missed what happened.
Accusatory right out the gate.
Yeah. What did you do? Did you bump someone off? What happened?
That's exactly what happened. No, so essentially, the original election was for 4 diff supervisors. And then there were 2 guys that were the directors, and they were going to stay on board and fill 2 of those supervisor positions just to make sure things went smoothly. After sitting through several meetings, I guess they felt like the supervisors pretty much had it handled. So they still have their role as directors, but they no longer needed to fill those 2 supervisor positions. So they went to the vote that we took, and rather than pull the network again, they just took the results and just moved down the list. And I believe Kanuker, oh my gosh, I'm butchering that, but he was up next.
Okay, it's not his real name.
Yeah, he was up next. And either didn't want the position or was unable to fulfill the duties. Not sure which. You'd have to ask him about that. But after him, it was Cole Allen and myself, and so we filled those 2 positions. And re-elections are in I think 6 months or something. So.
Okay, and how are you finding it so far? Have you been in many meetings? Was there like an initiation, like a secret ritual? Did you slaughter a goat or something? What happened?
Yeah, so essentially they came over to my house and they all had bars of soap and socks, and they just beat me with it while I was asleep. And when I finally regained consciousness, they said, "Welcome to the diff," and then I understood. But no, we have meetings every Monday, and some other days as well as the time allows, and we've seen several different opportunities, as well as a couple that we're still pursuing further. So overall, I'd say it's been pretty productive. I think from my view of everything, everybody on the team is contributing something valuable, and at the same time, I think we're not too eager to jump into something that isn't just right. And once we kind of have once we nail something down that we think would be a opportunity, after we do our due diligence and everything, we'll bring that to the Masternode network for a vote through the proper governance channels.
What do you think that you bring that's unique to the table? What separates you from the other diff supervisors? Because I've always known you as a community dev. So do you think that's your secret sauce?
Yeah, I think so, actually. In fact, some of the projects that we've been approached with happen to be right up my alley, as far as payment processing or those kinds of things, and point of sale solutions. So I was able to pretty quickly discern whether something would be a good value or not a good value, or how difficult it would be to deliver. So I think that's kind of my area is the expertise in the technology, what things are possible, not possible. It's if people are unfamiliar with technology, which I would say that most everybody in this space is somewhat familiar because you have to be in order to use it. But being a software developer, I think it's real easy to just throw out a bunch of jargon and confuse the shit out of everybody. And I think I'm able to parse that pretty easily. And so for me, I can go, yeah, that's a load of bullshit. or no, that's really smart, whatever the case is.
That's
so.
a very good talent to have in the space. There's just so much nonsense, so much like keyword nonsense. And the problem is it is a doubly effective strategy, because on the one hand, it confuses new people by sounding smart. It's like, well, they know what they're doing, I guess we'll put money in this. And then it confuses this most technically minded people, because they start seeing those elements and they start to fall in love with the technical details and be like, oh, well, this is cool technology and we'll work on it and stuff. And then the middle part, where people understand kind of how it works, but also kind of care about how it's going to work in the real world, who remain unimpressed, that kind of get passed over. A good example in my view of that is Lightning, where if you tell new users, oh, it's just basically gonna they have no idea how it works, and they think, all right, it sounds good. And then if you get people who get in the weeds into all like the end lock time, this and that, and all, like, then they start getting in love with the intricacy of like this and that, and then in the meantime, it's just like a real engineering failure. It just doesn't really work.
That's the quintessential example. I think Lightning Network is it's really bad. Engineering, from an engineering perspective, it's very interesting because it's a challenging problem. So somebody who's a very technical minded engineer falls in love with it, not because they think it's going to work or be great, but they want to solve the problem. And so there's that. And then there's the people who don't understand any of it and just want the hype of it. They fall in love with it for the fact that they can, number go up. And then there's the people in the middle that go, sounds really cool, but does it work? And those people are usually the most grounded and realistic, and they realize that, yeah, it sounds cool. No, it doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
So I noticed that Amanda posted a diff update on the Dash Pay subreddit yesterday or the day before, and she mentioned that there were currently 4 investment opportunities that were being reviewed by the diff. I know you can't reveal what they are, but as you're in the inner circle, do you feel the caliber of the opportunities presented? Do they interest you, without giving away too much details, because I don't want to get you in trouble? But I mean, is it what you thought it was going to be? Because the diff already identified certain not industries but areas that they would like to focus on. And with your background with Spark and POS solutions, and that, you kind of come into that category yourself. So the caliber of the opportunities that have been put forward and that you're currently reviewing in the diff, do they satisfy you? Or
actually, yes, there's a couple that really highly interest me. Not only from what I think that it can do for Dash, but also I think on a personal level, highly interests me. So yeah, we do have some really, really good opportunities. It's a matter of, like, right now we're, waiting on NDAs and all the other fancy stuff to get done with. And then we can have phone calls, dig a little bit deeper. So basically we kind of have a process that we go through, and it's the initial pitch, right? Like, they just say, hey, this is who we are, and this is what we want to offer, or what we have available, or whatever. And then from there, we can kind of talk amongst ourselves. Is this a good idea? Yes or no? Should we pursue it further? If we decide to pursue it further, we can get a couple more documents, just like surface level investor documents that will tell us these are what the projected financials are, yada, yada. And then if we have more specific questions, then sometimes we have to sign non-disclosure agreements, because they're going to reveal, sensitive information about the company or how they do business. And so when we sign those, we can get more detailed answers. And this is kind of the steps we have to go through. So everything takes a really long time. But I think it's important, because we are essentially carrying out a service that 5,000 masternodes, roughly, 4,600 or however many there are right now, can't get together and do all this in a very streamlined way. And so And so that's what we're here for. So we get to do all this due diligence stuff and decide that, oh no, these financials are not good. You guys aren't even profitable, or maybe it's like, okay, you are profitable. Now we want to make sure that we have agreements in place that we can guarantee you do this for us and we do this for you, and whatever the case is. And so we want to make sure that once we have all that stuff in place, then we can bring it to the network and say, here's what they've agreed to, here's what we've agreed to, and vote on this opportunity essentially.
I noticed Amanda said that, because it sounds like you have to have loads of meetings and follow-ups because there's just so much information to break down.
Yeah.
But I noticed that she mentioned that the diff always have to have 4 supervisors present in any one of those meetings, and including the chairperson as well. So is the chairperson in the diff, that's just one of the supervisors, and you nominate that internally? Is that on a monthly basis, or is that a quarterly basis?
I'm not sure how often they do that, as I've only been with the diff now for about a month. But yeah, I mean, since I've been there, Walter's been the chair, and I think everybody's pretty happy with that. During the meetings, he kind of directs the flow, and he sends an agenda out ahead of time. And hopefully I'm not revealing too much information, but he sends an agenda out ahead of time. We get to look over it, add things to the agenda if necessary. And then when the meeting comes, we have kind of an agenda to keep us from going on for hours, because it's real easy when you get a lot of these interesting opportunities to just sit there and talk about the possibilities. So he tries to keep us on a pretty good list, which helps a lot, I think, and helps us remain focused. But yeah, so he's the chairperson, and I think he does a really good job at it. So if it is up for election every month, I'd be inclined to vote for him again. I think he does a really good job. But overall, I think we're a pretty cohesive team. I don't think that the chairperson has much more necessarily like a responsibility or anything more than anyone else. And it's possible that if I looked at the voting order, maybe he was just the top one voted, and that's why he's the chair. I'm not sure.
Okay, cool. So when it comes to the diff, let's get into some interesting debate. And if you're in the live chat, I'd like to know your input as well on this. So my understanding is right now that the diff has to acquire money from the treasury, Dash from the treasury, and so far you have just over 1,000 Dash. So you have more than one Masternode, but you haven't set up a Masternode yet. Well, not that I'm aware of.
Right.
And in the after party last week that followed the previous Dash podcast, I was saying that I wouldn't have an issue with the diff setting up a Masternode as long as they didn't vote on it, because obviously they could vote for their own proposals, but as long as they were transparent and actually put like the Dash address out so we could confirm that it wasn't voting, I would see no issue with that.
Right.
Joel, how would you feel if, because like the prices come down, and I don't, do you see an issue with that? Because essentially them having a node, they're not voting on it, but they're also supporting and providing a service to the network as well.
Yeah, so I have never viewed, like, if you're hanging out with some money, you could put it to use and get something back from it with no risk. I never see that as a problem. Of course, they would have that raises certain amounts of complications, and we've had issues in the past where projects such as Kodaxx use treasury funds to not only run nodes but then use those treasury funds to vote against their enemies, and it was let's hope that never gets repeated again. So it definitely adds an extra layer of oversight, but in principle, I don't think that should be a problem at all.
Right. And so this is kind of, something that we've discussed internally, the possibilities there to set up a Masternode in order to cover operations costs and things like that. But we are very aware of that type of stigma, for one, and for two, voting. I think we were all in agreement when we talked about possibly setting up a Masternode. Obviously, asking the Masternode network before doing so is a big part of anything that we would do. But we did talk about if the Masternode network approved that, this would be something that it would be a non-voting Masternode. We all agreed on that, and then we would have to make our key, our voting key public so that people could verify that, of course.
Are you frustrated with the network a little bit? Because the cryptocurrency market over the last couple of weeks, the coin market's had a big pullback. Everyone suffered. And it wasn't that long ago that the network had a poll put forward to vote on how the diff should hold those funds. And they had, I think we had 5 or 6 different options where, you could keep it all 100% Dash, keep it in fiat, keep it in gold, keep half it in fiat, keep half in gold, all different kinds of combinations. Right. And the winner, of course, was to keep it 100% in Dash. Now, I'm wondering how the network feels now the prices come back, because I'm sure a lot of these opportunities coming to the table, even a small operation, it's still a substantial amount in terms of dollar amount, right?
Right.
And it's going to take a while to build up this treasure chest. So to be able to actually take advantage of opportunities. So it's a little bit frustrated, even internally within Dash Force with the price right now. We've been talking about, stable coins or, gold, Vulturo, but then you've got ongoing costs. I mean, how do you feel now about the price coming down? Was you happy the network voted 100% Dash, or do you wish it went another way?
Actually, I am happy with whatever the network chooses. I think that either way, it's a gamble. For example, the price goes down. Let's say we're half in gold and half in Dash. Price goes down, you lose if it's 100%. If it's half and half, price goes down, you did good. Perfect. Because you have some hedged in gold. Price goes up, you're stupid because now you got half in gold and the Dash appreciated. So it's a lose-lose either way, depending on which way the price goes, and no person can predict what the market's going to do. So, I mean, I'm happy with whatever the network chooses, and I think that's probably another reason why I feel like I'm right for a supervisor position, because I want what's best for the network, but at the same time, I also realize that my opinion isn't the one that matters. It's the whole. And so if that's the one that won out, that's how we chose to keep it. And I don't lose any sleep at night. I'm not mad at the network. It is what it is.
Do you think with regards to keeping money, here's the thing, right? If you've got investment opportunities coming to you and they're offering equity, I'm assuming that they're requesting fiat, US dollars or whatever. Have you discussed internally with the diff to say, would you take Dash for payment? Would you be open to it? And would you give preferential treatment if they would accept Dash over fiat?
That's a good question. I don't know if that's something that we've necessarily discussed at this point. They may have discussed it prior to me being there. I don't know if Walter's in the chat, he may be able to chime in. But that's a really good question, and I think partially if it hasn't been discussed yet, and it hasn't been at least since I've been there, is probably because we haven't quite gotten to that point where we feel like that there's an opportunity that we've completely vetted and have been prepared to give a serious offer to. So I think when that time comes around, that'll be probably be something that we discuss in a lot further detail. But that is a really good question, especially the preferential treatment. That puts kind of an interesting twist on it. Like if you have 2 opportunities and one says, oh yeah, we'll take Dash and we'll hold on to it because we're going to be an exchange or something, who knows? And yeah, I mean, me personally, I would prefer that they didn't cash it out for USD, definitely.
Yeah, Joe, how do you feel about that? do you care? Do you care about that, or do you just care about the equity and the opportunities?
Well, my number one thing I care about in terms of what the diff does with its money is I don't want it to be mismanaged. Like the entire thought of having money of investing money is not spending it on things. It's like when you buy a new car, that's not investing, right? You don't. Right. You want to get more of it, and so obviously during a short period of time, you could put it in something more stable or something, and then the prices make it so that the investment loses value short term, but over the long term, the investment should go up. And that's the thing about the diff is I think that people forget the I in the diff is it's investment. You're supposed to put money with expectation of future gain in excess of what you originally put in.
Yes.
And so it's not just what the diff invests in should end up being profitable long term, but it's also the diff should be profitable long term, as in if the network throws some Dash towards the diff, I think it's reasonable to expect that if they just threw it in a static address, that would be worth less than whatever the diff ends up doing with it.
Hopefully.
And of course, and obviously that's a really harsh prospect right out the gate. You know, that's a little that's very harsh to try to get that right out of the gate. It's almost certainly going to fail in like the very short term. But if you're talking about long term, we could spend this on other proposals or just not have the coins created. Or, we could put this here and see where we are a year or two from now or 5 years from now or whatever it is, then, that's kind of it. So in a short summary of what we should do with the money that actually gets created and before it gets thrown into other companies or things like that, I would say whatever preserves the value to the best. And of course, that means this is one of the worst times in the market to actually throw Dash into something else like USD or gold or something like that. So this is also an idea for the diff that I don't know if it's in the diff's wheelhouse, but to have a portion of the funds rather than invest in the infrastructure in the industry, but have a portion of the funds, like say 10% or something, to be just, so basically use it to buy fiat currency or precious metals or whatever else at the top of the market cycle, and then turn that into Dash at the bottom and just kind of grow the pie.
I see what you're saying there, but it's really tough with none of us being professional traders, but even professional traders get that wrong. And I've definitely thought about that personally. But it's just so risky that could you imagine if we timed that wrong and lost a bunch of the potential profits?
Now
that's just not okay.
Yeah. Now it depends, of course, on how granular of a focus on market cycles we have. Day trading, of course, is terrible. If you make money day trading or even month trading or whatever it is, you got to be first lucky, I'm sure, but also professional at it and focused on it, watching the charts all the time. But for example, I think that if I had, let's say, $1,000 worth of fiat today, just sitting, $10, $100 bills here, this would be the time to buy Dash. Here, what if Dash was $100? What if even $150? That whole range in there is a good, this is at a low part of the market. Now, when you're at $1,500, $1,600 Dash, it might not be the top. I mean, it was, but it's still you kind of. So in that case, say you sell Dash sell it at 800 because you think that's the top. And then, you buy it at 100 because you think that's the bottom. It's still, even though you're 200, even you still have that good range of profitability just from that kind of bit. But anyway, that's just
if that were foolproof, I'd be rich already.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a lot of traders who have actually made a lot of money doing it that way.
Sure. Yeah.
Without with relative reliability, not so much oh my gosh, I got wrecked. Oh, I didn't get wrecked. But anyway,
I don't have any problem doing that with my own money, but it's a different story when you're a custodian of an entire network's investment fund. You know what I mean? I see the potential there in doing that, but I also see the risk there, and I would hate that. I hate that. When we're representing almost 5,000 masternodes plus all the users in the network, because if the potential profits, for example, are burned or whatever, that's everybody. And so every one of Dash's users we're essentially representing in that sense. And if we make a mistake, that's bad.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, that one's more of a gamble for sure. Now, investing in anything is a gamble. You can invest in an up and coming exchange or an existing exchange and never make profits, but there's a difference when, on the one hand, with trading, you're essentially gambling, and on the other hand, you're only kind of gambling because you had some basis of knowledge in reality to go on. The crypto markets are, as we know, not based in anything.
Yeah. Well, so rather than, I guess, the speculation type thing of like you have everything in one thing or everything in another and just buy and sell back and forth frequently, or you try to time the market up and down. What about a simple diversification plus rebalancing kind of thing? Like you got half and half or whatever you have, or 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And then if one of those assets moons, then you sell half of the profits and put them in the other ones.
Sure.
So that you kind of like just kind of keep it in a nice, stable, well balanced.
That might be something that's possible if we, whatever strategies besides investing that we plan to take are going to take a vote, and the problem with that is votes cost us Dash, and so I think that's part of why we've been a little hesitant. The other thing is we're looking at hoping to get some type of system set up, like how we voted through Dash Watch for little simple things like that, like little questions. Obviously, investment opportunities, when they come about, will be taking the proper governance route. But little questions like that, we'd like to get votes timed with treasury cycles and hopefully, to increase the Masternode participation. Wow. And
I thought you were trying to say something big like participatory, which is a little more challenging, but still, yeah, it is a little bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah.
Try with whiskey, it's even harder.
I have, believe me.
I'm a little frustrated because the diff in itself is a revolutionary step forwards for cryptocurrency. It is the first of its kind in the crypto space.
I think in any space in the world.
Yeah, the first ownerless, memberless. Yeah, absolutely right. But my frustration is that I think it's going to take an eternity to accumulate enough Dash to really bring worthwhile investment back to make a substantial difference. And right now it's excellent, but it's on the sidelines. And there was some news last week that made me think about the diff, but it was from a rival cryptocurrency, and it's not the same structure and format. Now, it's Bitcoin Cash, and normally it's Joel who's bringing me up to speed on Bitcoin Cash, but they had some news last week. And if Dash does something new and innovative, you can be sure Bitcoin Cash isn't that far behind. I remember not that long ago, we had the whole proposal thing that Bitcoin Cash, I mean, obviously not in a decentralized governance nature like Dash, but a proposal-based system. Well, Bitcoin Cash is back again, and they've not created a diff-like setup structure, but they do have something. Yeah, I do think it's quite substantial. So last week, it was announced that Bitcoin Cash is to launch a $200 million Bitcoin Cash ecosystem investment fund. And it states that this investment fund is planned to launch in 2020, and it will focus on payment-related solutions and non-custodial financial services for Bitcoin Cash. The fund will invest in and incubate businesses like payment gateways, processors, there'll be payment processors, remittances, wallets, and merchant acquirers within the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. Now, that's pretty smart. And obviously, they've raised that via partners, and it looks like they're looking for additional institutional money to actually add more money onto that. I think they said in the article on Bitcoin.com that they're speaking to 20 other institutional money or investment companies, venture capitalist firms that are taking interest.
When you say they're speaking to, who's they?
That would be the Bitcoin Cash people. So I'm guessing that would be Roger directly, or there's actually a CEO of Bitcoin.com as well. I think the name escapes me. I think it's something Rust. Yeah. So like, even though it's not, decentralized in that nature. They're building out their ecosystem, and it's really smart because they're focusing on businesses and services within their own ecosystem to build out the Bitcoin Cash network, whether it be merchant-based, payment-based exchanges. So I think it's really, this is pretty substantial, and it's like, how can Dash compete with that? With the diff and the Dash prices that's like right now. I mean, even though we had first mover advantage, and it is, I appreciate it's a different setup and it's a different structure, but it's kind of like they're ahead of the curve on this one now. And I feel like even though they came to the party slightly later, they can skadoodle and achieve so much more.
I would say this: there's always going to be more than one way to do something. First of all, we've seen, and especially there's a decentralized approach and a centralized approach in cryptocurrency. And we often see the centralized approach win out because of convenience or speed or whatever the case is. Now, Dash has taken really good care to make sure that everything that it's done is decentralized, which, ironically enough, we get accused of centralization all the time, which is fucking wild. But notwithstanding, they have now something similar, a similar end, right? They have a fund that they can invest into things, right? But we've done it the decentralized way, and I understand that you say you appreciate the differences, but in the end, the users that we will attract from this value decentralization, and I think, in my opinion, those are the users that I'd like to attract. Obviously, we'd like to get everybody, but I think it helps to stick to your core ideals and build a solid foundation of people that appreciate what you're trying to build, even if it's the tougher road. Everybody acts like they want decentralization and they want it, but then they go to like Steam, which is 21 block producers, and they've literally designed it around the concept of, okay, proof of stake leads to centralization, proof of work leads to centralization, so why don't we just centralize it from the start? But we know that 21 people, that'll be enough, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so they built it. Yes,
which I saw some headline. Of course, I didn't look into it beyond that, so don't roast me if it turns out to be nonsense. But someone determined that 7 of the EOS block producers may be the same entity. And
not only that, they're sharing one database, right? They're actually running one node, but they have like 6 different front-end points is what I read. So they have only one storage capacity. So they're storing the blocks on one drive, and they're all talking to that one drive. So their capital output is not even 6 times as normal.
Well, so that's the thing I was thinking about this whole big investment thing is, first off, the crypto space runs on headlines like that, oh my gosh, giant thing, institutional investors coming, backed us around the corner, Wen Moon, Lin Lambo, all this kind of stuff. Jack Dorsey's going to pump everything. It's always something like that. And so rather, people tend to either have a celebrate or FUD knee-jerk reaction where they're either like, this is awesome, or they start saying, well, but I don't know about this. This is stupid. Yeah. And I try to be neither. I kind of hang back and look at it. So first off, a $200 million investment into the ecosystem is always, that's a good, big, solid number. And that's always going to be a good thing. And considering
I can't take that away.
Yes, and considering that that's supposed to be targeted at adoption of a ostensibly decentralized payment system, censorship resistant, better money payment system, that seems good to me. Now, some of the devil's in the details though is whose money. I'm sure Roger Ver probably has 80% to do with a lot of that.
Yeah, it's just pure speculation, but I would guess about 80%.
So it could be a significant amount. There's other investors, and as you mentioned, there's the general. Well, first off, when Dash invests, because Dash is not people, Dash is like a amoeba. It's this decentralized autonomous organization. This is a living thing, kind of, that has its own interests at heart, and not necessarily the interests of any individual, but of all the individuals who are plugged into it. And so because of that, Dash can invest in Dash's future. This group cannot necessarily have incentives aligned to invest in Bitcoin Cash's future alone. Now,
Right.
if the investors have the majority of their holdings in Bitcoin Cash, then they want to see the token value go up. But that doesn't mean that, and of course, if they have mining farms, then actual usage on the network also profits them. But those are assumptions. They could just be like rich people that they could just want profits, and it could be profits however they come. And so if they create, let's say we invest in a bunch of companies that use Bitcoin Cash primarily, at some point there might be a crossroads where it's like, okay, look, you can support this or support that. They might get a lot more of their business from something like BTC or from something like Dash. Yeah, and in that case, those companies make money, and therefore their investors make money by putting Bitcoin Cash second. Or the opposite could be true. By putting Bitcoin Cash first, then there might be a point in which they're not necessarily profitable anymore. In that case, they're kind of a loss of money. So it's a little bit of a different situation. And as you also mentioned, the decentralization kind of aspect, where it's not like, well, what are these people going to do once they get a hold of, okay, well, let's think further down the line. What if
I want to explain how important that is.
Go for it.
Decentralization. If you think about this, like, here's an interesting scenario, and I will big picture this really quickly. Okay, you have a $200 million investment fund. Let's say I invest in company A, who is going to build a point of sale system for Bitcoin Cash, right? Now, first question, do I have agreements in place with them that they're not going to add a bunch of other coins? Yes or no? Okay, you're going to want to say yes, right? You want that agreement in place because you're investing in Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. Okay, so who is that agreement with? It's with Roger Ver and friends, obviously, or whoever invested the money. So now I have an agreement. Let's say I'm the point of sale developer. I have an agreement with Roger Ver, and hypothetically, we're going to build a Bitcoin Cash point of sale system. Well, let's say another fork happens down the road and they switch to a different coin. Now, me as a company, I don't agree with the new fork that Roger went to or whatever. And this is all, like I said, hypothetical, but now what do I do as a company? Do I get to stay with Bitcoin Cash? No, I'm in an agreement with him that I can only be with his coin. And so now that he's on a new coin, do I have to follow him over? Now you have
like the end-chain patents with all those Bitcoin Cash wallets and things.
Exactly what I was getting at. So now, like, Hand Cash and all those guys had to go over to SV. Now they all claim that they wanted to, and that was their choice. The Money Button guys, the Hand Cash guys. But to me, it seems a little odd that it was basically only those projects that moved over.
Yes, of course.
And so maybe they didn't have a choice. And
yeah,
you talk about this $200 million investment fund. That's what you end up with is you have agreements in place or you don't. If you don't have agreements in place, you could be investing in my company and I could decide to add Dash to the platform. If we do have agreements in place, then wherever you go, I got to follow. And
you can't be. But okay, let's look at on the flip side though. I mean, we really shouldn't be surprised by this. We know Roger has put his money to, good use for both Bitcoin prior to Bitcoin Cash, and he was actually the first angel investor in Bitcoin, really. So,
right.
However, up until this point in time, a bit like our treasury system for the diff, people could put proposals forward and they essentially get a grant. And that would have been his situation for integrations or any businesses coming forward. And he didn't really have the legal framework really to hold them to account, or at least in terms of the network, right? To take essentially what could be classed as equity. So by creating a fund, he now has that vehicle to be able to do that where he may not have had to do so before. Now, on the announcement on Bitcoin.com, they claim that every single day they get to like 6 to 8 different proposals from software companies, businesses and services looking to integrate Bitcoin Cash. So they need to review that. So yes, I do.
Quite a few as well.
Yeah, I would hope so.
I mean, our Reddit posts will say, we're talking to company A, B, and C, but these are the ones that we've decided to pursue further. We get tons. I mean, part of the diff is you have to wade through a lot of bullshit. Everyone has something. Hey, invest in my meetup group, or you know what I mean. So they could easily say we have 8 proposals, and somebody's just saying, hey, I want to build fucking talking Furby, or I want to, whatever. I want to build the fucking chicken app. What's the chicken app? Where you send a Bitcoin Cash and it feeds the chickens. Invest in me, and it's like you can count that as a proposal, sure.
Yeah, and also something to consider with all this is, I mean, obviously, first off, who is actually going to get any of this money? They might be 10 years later, and they still have like 150 million left because they're just not finding worthy causes, and they're being, very judicious in that. There's also a possibility where this whole investment type thing, because it was just declared as this giant thing, like Dash's treasury has not been pimped out that much, right? It's over this many years, we have this much left, and it could be that this is a headline generator, hoping to pimp the price a little bit. This is, of course, maybe a little conspiratorial type thing. But what if they say they throw 20 million into this payments company, that has everything all over this continent and blah, blah, blah. And it just sounds amazing. And then the price goes up by enough that then they make their investment back on PR alone. It could be a vehicle for that. And it could just be, they just, whenever they see a judicious opportunity where they get to throw money in and then they can get more in, and especially if they can time it with market cycles. Again, here we go with the market cycle typing thing. Right now, this feels like bare bottom, right? Or, depending on, earlier in the year, maybe, but it feels like this is pretty low. And so you could just say, like, you could time these things so that there's a high likelihood the price will be going up for other reasons anyway. And then you could claim credit that look at all this growth from our investment in the thing, and then it goes up. But ultimately, this is the kind of thing that can, and just to finish on the centralization aspect real quick, if a giant portion of the Bitcoin Cash infrastructure is tied to a certain group of investors, while the network itself might be censorship resistant, it's still a single point of failure for its entire use case. To where now you can start saying, hey, BitPay, why don't you start implementing AML KYC? Hey, Purse, why don't you start implementing, hey, other company, why, like, you can come to those companies and kind of strong arm them. And then you can only use Bitcoin Cash practically speaking, under some very difficult circumstances. But beyond that, this is the kind of thing you could start a fund like this for Dash tomorrow. You would, of course, you need a Roger Dash or something like that, right? But you could start something like this in addition to the treasury. Like the treasury is its own little thing that does its own things, but you could start, diff rogue.
I mean, you could start a pool where Masternode owners all that donate their Masternode earnings to a pool, and it's something else. You know what I mean? Like aside from the treasury, earnings go to a pool. I mean, anything could be done the way that Dash is set up. And also, real quick, I just want to make clear that at some point during this conversation, well, at all points during this conversation, any views that I've expressed are not inherently held by the diff officially.
Yeah, you're just talking.
Yeah.
What?
I just wanted to express that real quickly, but definitely at some point in this conversation, I went full set the diff aside and just went all on my own. The diff has no opinions of Bitcoin Cash or Roger Ver, none whatsoever.
Yes. Of course. Yeah, so it's definitely something you could use. You could create a diff rogue, which is just like, or a diff 2 or whatever you call it, another diff that's not funded by the treasury at all, that's funded by people with Dash that just say, we're going to throw a whole bunch of Dash into here, and we're going to do better than the diff without subsidies. So for example, you could hire some cracker of an investment manager and just say, look, we actually believe in the future of Dash, its technology and what it can do and what businesses can do and save money and, make tons of money by using this technology. So we're going to get together a couple $100 million, throw it into a pot, and anything that's idle, any Dash that's idle will be in Masternodes just to like generate some extra stuff. Then we'll invest in companies, will make profit, will make it all back again and stuff. Like you can do the exact same thing with Dash. And Dash has been a perpetual underdog story. And at some point, that's going to, what people don't realize is how much Dash has been punching out of its league, that the number of people involved, like it's a very small group of people and attention that has just hung on and slowly, consistently grown where like the rest of the space is on, new thing here, oh, squirrel, all over the place. And so at some point, especially if Dash starts to have some big success stories, then we're going to start seeing we're going to start seeing people like this, funds like this being created outside of just the treasury.
Yeah. I do think it's important to say, just for clarity, that they state that this fund will be launched in the first quarter of 2020. And in the announcement, they say that they screened over 20 different investment companies to give their money. So it doesn't sound like it is coming from Roger, but they obviously have a vested interest in Bitcoin Cash.
Okay.
And that's just the ones that pass their approval process. But they already do have a live website page where you can submit your business plan. So they are already taking things on board. So I just think it's important to, sometimes look outside the echo chamber and things that are going on elsewhere, because we can always learn from it.
I always do, and sometimes I'm chastised for it. Like people are like, "Oh, bro, you're into this or you're into that," and I'm like, "Look, man, I never run like this."
Yeah, but like
how can the diff compete? I mean, this reminds me of the summary call. And for those that missed the summary call, definitely go check out dashnews.org, #1 source for Dash News Online, where Joel did the top 5 biggest takeaways from the Q3 summary call. And the biggest thing to come out of that was actually from the Q&A session in terms of debate in the community, because one of the things put forward was a question about reallocation of the block rewards, and that's caused a heavy debate. And of course, when it comes to the diff, for example, if we move from, say, for example, a 10% block reward allocation to the treasury based system to 20%, obviously the diff would then have the opportunity to potentially acquire more Dash faster, be able to invest and grow our ecosystem in a similar fashion. But
I'd like to see the diff model proven before.
Now let me just finish wrapping up on the 200 million thing, because this is a great segue about like more is better. It'd be interesting to see how much money Dash has had available through the treasury since its inception. If you call like when this treasury payouts were, what's the total amount? And this reminds me of Decred getting a treasury and getting better governance and things like that, and Smart Cash and Pivex and all kinds of other coins that have followed in Dash's footsteps, and I guess now Bitcoin Cash too, although in their own kind of way. And think about the failures of the Dash treasury system. Now think about all the things that were funded that didn't work out, all the scammers, all the things like the adoption initiatives, all the everything that just didn't work out. And as any successful person will tell you, success is built on top of a mountain of failures.
Oh, I see exactly where you're going with this.
So Dash has been failing forever, as we've seen, failing and learning, trying stuff that didn't work, learning from other people's mistakes too, and going on. And what remains to be seen is what any of these programs have learned from Dash, or more importantly, are there things they have to learn on their own, and have they learned them? And so, for example, I wonder if there's anyone who has a great business plan for mass merchant adoption for Bitcoin Cash in Colombia or something. I wonder who might come up with an idea such as that, and just manages to get a big old grant. And then they learn that, and then they get a transaction tracker going too. And then it's like, look at all these transactions. But then they realize that they're just subsidizing everything. And when it's not subsidized, like 1 or 2 people per week might use it. And then it ends up being and then they rage quit off to Decred or something. I'm just saying, throwing out hypothetical here. What if they haven't learned that lesson?
I'd never thought of that before, but that's totally entirely possible.
Yes.
I got some numbers for you, Joel, as you requested it, but they're out of date though, because they only go up until the start of this year, but the numbers are still quite substantial. So if you go to dashintel.org, there is a slide called Budget History, and this site used to be operated by the people that run Dash Nexus. I'll just put it in the live chat so you all can follow along. This looks like it only was active up until December 2018, but the total funding up until that point had been $39 million equivalent. And the maximum funding for a one budget cycle was 5.5 million US dollars, which is pretty substantial amount. And of course, that would have been December 2017. And do I wish we could get back to all-time highs right now.
Yeah, can you imagine? I believe in December only 40% of the budget was spent, and I would have loved to put the extra bit, throw it to the diff, which would immediately hedge into gold and fiat and all the other stuff, and we'd have so much money. But then again, let bygones be bygones, right? I'm just saying. But if you look at that, so Dash has had what about a good chunk of that. So so say you get like 6 times that money, like then that's kind of what Bitcoin Cash has now. And of course, that total amount is going to go up and up and up because there was so much of Dash's history where Dash was below the price it is today. And when the price goes up more, so pretty soon we should have exactly that. Now, there's been a lot of hard lessons learned, and also we got to realize there was a whole network, like thousands of masternodes that participated in learning these lessons, as well as the rest of the community involved. And we don't, because it's so transparent, I think like the Dash learning experience is crowdsourced. The failure system of Dash, of trying things and they fail and trying different things and until you find a success, is completely crowdsourced, whereas the knowledge pool that this investment foundation of Bitcoin Cash is probably much smaller. There's just a very few people who are involved in decision making and seeing what works and what doesn't. There's probably not going to be a lot of public discussions about, not to the degree that Dash has had, about what's going on with these funds. So don't overestimate how wisely this kind of stuff might be used. Just see what comes out of it. We might be surprised.
So
allocation.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I was mentioning about the conversation starter in the Q&A from the summary call about a potential, would core be open or to discuss a potential reallocation of the block reward allocation, to which Ryan Taylor replied, and it kind of took me by shock because I wasn't expecting it, saying there may be some form of proposal or information submitted or presented to the network by the end of this year to review, which is fascinating. But just as we're speaking hypothetically, Kodaxx, would you like to see the treasury, for example, get 20% of the block reward?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
Because like that would show. So I'm just thinking, and this got proposed in Discord, but it seemed to resonate with quite a few people. Say like
conversation.
Yeah, like 40, because right now it's 45, 10 for those that are listening and aren't familiar.
So, I would say, in my opinion, I think that I foresee the Masternode network handling more and more responsibility for the security of the coin as time goes on. As well as other features, instant send it and whatnot, more bandwidth, more higher requirements, etc. I see that happening. I also think that the effects of reduced proof of work mining on Dash should be studied a little bit more before reallocation occurs. Because like, I'm not saying that it can't work better, but it works really great right now. If you change it, it could work better. It could also be worse. So I think there needs to be some studies done into that. But assuming everything is just fine and either the same amount of miners remain or the reduced miners don't pose any problems, if that's the case, I could see some reallocation happening that way. The only problem that I have with reallocating 20, like the treasury getting 20%, is the treasury is a great thing, and I think it's helped Dash a lot. But I would venture to guess that a large majority of the funds paid out in the treasury are then immediately converted to USD.
Mm-hmm.
If we start converting more to USD, that puts a higher
selling pressure.
Yeah.
So
that would need to be studied as well.
That's a really great point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is I think
you can't study. I mean, they're markets. You know what I mean? So if we get the treasury to a point that we're seeing great results, whereas we put in this much and we got this value for it, and we're consistently seeing that results, I see no problem giving the treasury 20%. But as of right now, we're still in a pretty early learning phase where, we gave this person a bunch of money and they fucking vanished, and what happened? Okay, well, that went out the window. Well, essentially, value lost.
But then on the flip side, say if you took 10% from the miners, then most of those miners would have been selling those Dash onto the exchanges anyway, right?
Yeah,
so
possibly, yeah.
And most miners now are mining at a loss for a number of cryptocurrencies. So, that's not just individual retail individuals mining. That's mining pools as well. They're mining at a loss, which is crazy. But yeah,
they're just hoping to keep mining at a loss long enough that a couple other people drop out and they're back profitable again. So I understand, but you're right. You're absolutely right. But that's why I think that I, in my personal opinion, I think the end of the year is a little too soon to talk reallocation. I think if they were to put a proposal, and I don't know, maybe they've been studying this for a really long time, but if they were to put a proposal out, I would like to see some data about the effects of reduced mining or if mining will be reduced. I mean, if they don't see that happening, I'd like to know why.
Yeah, and that's that another part of not the effects. We also have to realize that the reason they're talking reallocation was that chain locks make the network super secure, and you don't really need that much proof of work mining. Now, recently, there was in the last couple of days, there have been some observations on the network that quite a few times on specific blocks, chain locks have failed. There's been instances where they haven't locked in the block, and of course, then a few blocks later it gets locked, and then of course it's all retroactively secured.
Right.
So it's not a big problem, but
if you have reduced mining, if you have reduced proof of work mining and a chain lock fails, there's a potential attack vector that we had not considered before.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying. If the block reward if there's not enough hash rate, you could easily come in and disrupt the network temporarily. It has to be high enough that it's still difficult to attack by proof of work alone.
Right.
So that's the first thing I think would be great. It would be
advice I would put out to miners currently mining Dash. Obviously, this talk of reallocation is a ways off. But if you're smart, don't sell your Dash for USD. Hold it until you have enough for a Masternode, because then you've got both sides of the fence.
Yeah, something like that. Now, another thing I think it would be good if miners could, if there were trustless Masternode shares. Trustless Masternode pooling would make it a lot easier for people who are just participating in mining but don't have 1,000 units of Dash or can't sell their equipment or whatever for 1,000 units of Dash to be able to do something like that.
I think that changes things a lot as well.
Yes. So that's the second thing. So first, we got to make sure chain locks really work, and the proof of work mining hash rate is enough to cover any shortfalls. Second, we got to trustless shares would be a great part. And of course, third, how you do this is a giant issue, because it's having a different allocation is not a bad thing necessarily. Changing the allocation is a big prickly issue, because masternodes can vote. That's it. And the thing is, they get 45% of the money receiving entity votes. Now, as far as that vote itself, I mean, obviously the 10%, and no one owns the treasury. The Masternode's direct vote. That doesn't matter. Let's just say 50% then. So 50% gets the vote. 50% of the money receivers from the block reward don't vote. Like you can't vote by your proof of work. That doesn't work. That works. It does work with Nakamoto consensus, but it's a different consensus layer. So if you have, say, the Masternodes say, oh, absolutely, we need more money to finance our nodes because network costs are going higher. Oh yeah, sure, new treasury. Take it from the miners. They can 100% vote to take it from the miners, and then it's like, well, how do we get their representation? Because if you don't, you're either like screwing miners, and then miners, even those who can maintain profitability, decide to say, well, they'll just jerk away our profits at a moment's notice. We're just going to not invest in the network at all. Or they could just say, yeah, you know what? We're not going to switch over to the new code. We're just sticking to the old code, or we're going to update the code, but just not have the reallocation as part of that and just run that. And then all of a sudden you have this giant mess where you can't get the miners to switch because, so
this is where we hope our incentives are aligned, right? We hope that the masternodes are thinking about the miners in lieu of the potential fuck up mess that could happen. Like,
yes, exactly.
The miners want to protect their investment. So hopefully they wouldn't rush into taking more.
I'm worried about it though, because essentially it's the Masternode network that decides. So the proposal we put to them, and even if there's like a number of options that they go to choose, do you trust the Masternode network? Because obviously they could have the option to sway the odds in their favor in terms of allocating more to the Masternode and block rewards.
Yes, of course.
And it'd be like, oh, this is good.
Exactly. But, and that's the prickly thing. And so that's why
if the network gets unstable and value tanks, they're losing. So that's why I'm saying hopefully the incentives are aligned enough that they think about that possibility while protecting their investment.
Yeah. Now, do you remember the whole learning from other people's mistakes thing? Segwit 2x fiasco. So first off, during the days of the Bitcoin hash wars, or not the hash wars, not even then, the whole block size debate problems, you had mining pools signaling support for proposals, right? They were mining hash power was saying, oh yeah, we'll implement this if this happens. And so you kind of had a polling system by hash rate, and it was usually pretty even, but the majority was in favor of larger block size, but not enough to where it was like, oh, this is going to be a certain thing. Then with the New York Agreement, a whole bunch of organizations controlling 90% of the hash power said, look, let's just compromise and do Segwit 2x. They're like, all right. And then they all signaled, 90% of the hash rate signaled that they wanted this to go through. And so literally 90% of the network would have done that. But then, of course, a whole bunch of people started doing the UASF, the soft fork thing, and signaling that they weren't going to go along with the hash rate, and then they got all scared, and then it just fell apart. So that's kind of like the miners 90% coming to consensus at the same time as the masters aren't in consensus. And so the opposite's also true. So what I would like to see is sort of a double type of thing. Get the major hash rate providers of Dash to signal support. Of course, you'd have to go to the miners and talk to them and say, look, you're getting less percentage of the block reward, but this is going to increase the value of the coin long term, and you're going to have more stuff. You're going to get more fees, more profitability, and the value of the coin is probably going to go up. But this is going to be better for Dash as a whole. And then, all right, and then you convince them to then sign off on it and start signaling. So then you have 95% of the hash rate, or whatever the threshold is, of Dash's hash rate signaling that they're going to adopt the new code once released, and you get a masternode vote. And you get those two things together, and it's like, well, this is the best we can do. So then the developers come up with, the actual code. Then the miners already signaled they would implement it, and then, let's hope they actually implement it. And then you have a nice smooth kind of a thing. But if you just have the masternodes voted, and then the one group that can't vote, like, for example, if a masternode decided to give 10% of their earnings to the treasury, then I don't care so much that
imagine like King Arthur going, yeah, we'll hold a vote here in the castle and see if we should take a little bit more taxes. Right? It's like kind of that.
No taxation without representation, am I right? Oh.
Right.
So that's the thing with this whole thing. So first off, how you make the decision is going to be hugely influential.
Big
And it has to be what would you call it? It has to be very representative of everyone, especially the people who are losing money or losing percentage of the pot. And the second thing is, I think that this has to be like a one and done for the foreseeable future. I mean, Dash has already been around, coming up on 6 years, right? And so that's a good, for the current block reward split, that's a pretty good track record of like, okay, you can invest for the next half decade and you can be sure it's going to be this way. But if you change it, not only do you have to be very careful about how you change it in terms of the governance idea of it, but you have to also let people, I invested a whole bunch in machines and they're not going to be worthwhile in a few years. You have to be sensitive to that as well.
Are you sure that they're talking about putting a proposal in at the end of this year?
No, not like a treasury proposal, not like this is what we want to do, but I think they're going to start discussions.
I see.
They're going to say, this is what we think we should do. And then the community, and eventually they hash out and they vote on it and figure out how it's done.
That makes sense. I thought you were talking about putting in a proposal to change it by the end of the year. And I was like, oh, I would not rush into it that quickly.
Yeah, did that just loosen your loins when you heard that? You're just like, oh.
Yeah.
Is there a danger, though? Because ultimately, there are many variables in this, because also it depends how it's perceived outside of Dash as well, to be a good thing or a bad thing. Whenever you're changing the block reward allocation, that's the fundamental core of the monetary aspect of that project. Now we know, but I mean, so it could be viewed, because it's a reputation, it's a credibility issue as well. Like Bitcoin, 100% of the block reward goes to the miners, but we know. Yeah, but in other projects, it's not that unheard of. I know in Zcoin, I think 6% of the block reward goes to the core team for development. Even with Monero, Joel, will remember this. Do you remember the fluffy tax for development? It got kind of pushed away, swept under the rug.
Oh yeah, the proposed fluffy tax.
So I mean, so I think for people in the crypto space, it won't be that unheard of. But I do think also it depends how the media portrays it as well.
That's the biggest, and I almost forgot that angle. Whew, that's going to be a thing where no matter how equitably it's all figured out, you're going to have to, before you put out so first off, you don't even put out a budget proposal or whatever, a governance proposal, before you kind of know how it's going to turn out. You want to be very careful, and then you have to be
that out. That's going to be news tomorrow.
Yeah, and then you want to hit a media circuit and say why you're changing it, what's going on. You want to hit it right away. Yeah, you want to do a big press release that explains stuff. You want to make sure that first off
why you're just changing it in the first place.
Before even why, it's first how are you going to make sure this is decentralized and representative of the entire ecosystem. There's always going to be fudders and haters and all that kind of stuff, but you want to get out and just tell everyone that it's going to be representative. The miners aren't getting screwed. They get to talk. They get an input on this, and you got to do that. Second, you got to say something about, is this going to lead to some other this and that? No security. No. You have to actually break down exactly why. Blah 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 blah. You also have to say, because people are going to say something about Dash is struggling, it's dying, it's just doing whatever because it's running out of money. This is a death blow. You have to have some kind of a thing where you explain exactly, no, Dash has been fantastically successful with this. In fact, we're looking, and by fine-tuning the block reward to begin with, this is why Dash is so successful. And guess what? We're going to do it even better. So there's a few different things to kind of go through before you end up being able to do this from a PR standpoint. And then you just have to have the FUD patrol on max alert for the foreseeable future, because everyone's going to be like, this sucks. People still call Masternodes some centralized scam thing. They still don't understand that, it is what it is.
And now Ethereum wants to do validator nodes, everyone. So I mean, it's just a sign of time. It just takes people a while to catch up.
Like we always say, Dash is the original innovator, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
innovate, don't imitate.
I would say it's the second generation innovator, if you see, because BTC Bitcoin put a lot of stuff out there that ends up being copied. But after that, you could say that.
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed on Twitter, at least, or maybe it's just my Twitter, but I've noticed the sentiment changing around the scam, maximalist. Like people are talking about. I read a tweet from I think it was Peter McCormick, who's talking about how he thinks he might have gone a little bit overboard with the scam thing, and so he's obviously self-reflecting right now. I was like, wow.
Do you want to talk? Should we talk about maxis then? Do we have time? Or have we gone over time? I don't know. I think we're going for 1 hour 20 minutes or so. I think, or
1 hour 10. Well, let's spend 5 minutes on maxis, if that's all right with you guys, because they're a great subject.
Okay, cool. Well, so do you think the maximalism tribalism has got worse on Twitter? Do you think people are stepping up, especially when the price comes down, because people get emotional, right?
Yeah, and I think it's gotten really bad, but I think it's almost like it's gotten so bad that now people are like, oh wait, let me dial this back a little bit, because I gotta I'm starting to see it now. And I could be wrong, but it could just be my Twitter, but I'm starting to see people talking about maybe we went a little bit overboard, and
it's because they were at Thanksgiving dinner, and last year they were all evangelical about Bitcoin, telling their family and friends about Bitcoin. And this year they kind of got their tail tucked between their legs, and they're like, they've had a humbling experience.
So over time, I've stopped feeling really positive and really negative about societal movements. I've become a little bit more balanced because everything has a reaction. And so one thing, for example, I think that social justice warriors and Bitcoin maximalists are essentially one and the same in just different ways, where you had this horrific persecution of anyone who's outside of the acceptable box of ideas in terms of stand-up comedy and politics and things like that. And then of course with crypto there's the same thing, and they're just getting more and more shrill. But now people are starting to to use the stand-up comedy allegory. Stand-up comedy legend Dave Chappelle did something in his stand-up special where he was just talking about how everyone's so triggered all the time, and he went against the PC police hard. And as a result, his very good work, which he's consistently highly rated, was completely panned by critics, saying it's problematic, this guy is terrible, blah 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 blah. And then other people started doing the same thing in their specials. Now I can hardly watch a comedy show without someone mocking these people that have tried to silence them. And it's oh, there we go. Good old Chappelle took the arrows in the back, and now he's and now the whole tide is starting to turn. Before you know it, I think this whole PC nonsense is going to be over within the decade, gone. I think it's already lost. Now the same thing is with maximalism. Using that analogy to maximalism. It's the shrillest it's been, because it started to get shrill when they got the hubris of their power of Bitcoin is 20 grand, just blah blah blah, and then the prices crash, and then when the prices crash and Bitcoin recovered faster than alts, then they started to get all arrogant again. And then with this latest crash, they just gotten even more crazy, where they're blocking everyone right and left and just saying, because your key value proposition, you can't hold on to it anymore. You can't say, number go up, because it go down. And then I think a lot of people are starting to be just really tired of that. And
I don't think it's just Bitcoin maximalists, although they're the largest group in my opinion, but it could be a Bitcoin Cash maximalist or an Ethereum maximalist. Maximalism in general is obviously just toxic. You can truly appreciate a coin and really believe that it has the best technology, but to think that there's no other coin doing anything worthwhile whatsoever it's
garbage.
It's completely wrong. That's just a trash opinion. I am of the opinion that Dash has some of the best technology in the entire space.
It's because you're smart.
Right. But you guys know, I've been in the Discord and as recent as a week ago have said, hey, Bitcoin Cash has this neat feature. What are we doing about that? Do we have something similar? If not,
Yeah, exactly.
Like I'm not afraid to say, oh, this coin's doing this thing, or like Ethereum has its whole thing with the programmable smart contracts. It's got DAI and Compound is a really interesting use case of blockchain. I'd be
or we're not afraid to say we need a stable coin.
Yeah.
All right,
And
that's
I'd be
another tangent.
I would be an idiot to say that no, all those coins are trash. They're not doing anything. Their technology is a complete waste of time. Dash forever. And I mean, yeah, Dash has some of the best technology out there. But
yeah,
like
now
I said earlier, I don't run like this. I
guess
can
what?
see the other things going on.
There's an exception to this death of maximalism. There's one place where maximalism is alive and well and even growing. Bitcoin SV.
Oh, of course, yeah.
There's a new group, and that's the thing is this is where things go. The up and down of things go.
Yeah.
As maximalism, so BTC maximalism, as it just representing 2/3 of the market share. Obviously that's like a big thing. But then as that's starting to, I mean, I wouldn't even say it's starting to go, it's ready to crash. It's still at its peak. But as that is ready to crash, as the maximalism there is ready to crash, the maximalists who are remaining from the dispersion will probably all be over in SV. And that's going to be its own thing for a while. And so when you see SV maximalism growing, I don't think we should take that as, oh no, maximalism is growing. No, just in this one small kind of area. But for one, I've heard almost no Monero maximalism as of late. There was some back in the day. I don't know if you remember. Some people were saying like they're trying to get Bitcoin Cash people, or before there's a Bitcoin Cash, they're trying to get that whole community to get on Monero. They're like, oh, well, everything can run on Monero. We're going to do this and that. And now they're just kind of like doing their own thing a little bit more.
This has been pretty grim for them lately. Delistings everywhere. Whew. They've had a number of exploits, I think, discovered and maybe patched. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's always ups and downs, and the price compared to a lot of other projects, Dash included, is holding up pretty well for the time being. But that's what I'm saying is you got like Litecoin people. I don't know, but Litecoin's never been a maximalist coin to its credit, I guess. It's always been we're number 2,
Yeah. The silver to Bitcoin's gold, right? That's whoever came up with that fucking marketing slogan was a genius.
Yeah. Apparently you've been reading my op-eds, haven't you? That was the subject of one of my op-eds.
I remember that was maybe a month or so ago, huh?
Yeah.
I feel like we should give a salute to the Dash miners out there. If you're a Dash miner and you're watching or listening to this, we do appreciate and respect you. I have been keeping an eye on the live chat and hashtag miner lives matter. And I agree. And actually, Joel, I recall seeing an article recently about the Dash hash rate doing tremendously well, which is a very healthy sign for mining in Dash. And the hash rate looks like it's doing tremendously well, where as opposed to other cryptos, some that we've mentioned very recently, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, BSV, haven't actually been doing that well. So all is well in terms of Dash mining right now. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Dash's hash rate has been going up and more importantly, holding strong, while a lot of other currencies have been not doing that well. Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV have been flat. Litecoin is that's one of my favorite things. It's if I'm having trouble, if I'm feeling down, if my life isn't going the way I want, I just go to bitinfocharts.com and then click on Litecoin and then click on the hash rate chart because it's a little rough to tell me. It's like if you look at it's even lower. Oh, that's so bad. So it was 317 terahashes in August, and it's down to 149 right now. So it's just like the visual is everything. I'm going to put that in the live chat just so you can see, because it's pretty funny. And if you do that for Dash and obviously it's not comparable in terms of the hash rate numbers, but if you put it the 3 month for Dash as well, it's doing significantly better. It's going up and up and up. And it's pretty funny because the fees that like Litecoin makes over the course of a day, like the whole network generates about like $400 worth of fees. And it's like, that's not going to pay for anything at any point. And so, and there's no growth. There's no growth in transaction volumes either, or active addresses. Now, Dash is growing in both. And Bitcoin SV is like 20% higher transaction volumes than Bitcoin right now, but their fees are still like half of what Litecoin has, or if not less, because basically it's all like pumpy things. It's nothing with an economic value to it. And once those blocks start to fill up and there's limited space, you're going to start seeing people not being able to do that anymore. But anyway, things are looking great from Dash from a mining perspective, which is kind of funny considering that I was talking about, reallocating and stuff. But it's pretty, it's pretty funny.
Altcoins and stuff. I have an interesting thought, and there was a thing on Twitter the other day. Who was it? Omar or somebody? Omar Bram or Brahm. Mm-hmm. Posted something about if you could hold one coin, which one would it be? And I left a thing on there. And one of the things I said about Bitcoin Cash was just that it's got some interesting things going on, but it shares the hashing algorithm with BTC, and that worries me. To me, that's a security risk. You have all this hash power that could just come over, fuck shit up, and leave. And do you think that obviously they kept the hashing algorithm because it's true to Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Do you think that was the only reason? Or do you think that they're hoping that all these existing miners can move over here and mine, without bad intentions, mine with good intentions?
Well, wasn't there Jihan Wu? There's the Jihan Wu and Bitmain and stuff. It would have been. It was in their best interest to keep it.
Yeah, it was honestly. I think a lot of people did not expect the splits to go the way they did on either chain, on either of the three main things. I'm pretty sure most people thought that Bitcoin Cash would either die out very quickly, or it would be the one true Bitcoin within a year or two, and then BTC would just wither away. And it's none of that has happened.
They thought the same thing. There'll be one chain one Bitcoin Cash at the end of this. No, there won't.
And they needed the miners to switch over easily to be able to support the new fork, right? So they needed all those Antminer S9s to be able to switch over to be able to support it. I mean, but yeah, they are dwindling now. I want to take this opportunity, as we've been talking about the reallocation, and a lot of this is speculation on our part. The information hasn't been given out yet, and although we described it as a proposal, we'll just have to wait to see what it is. So hopefully there'll be something up by the end of December. But if you are watching this after the live, I'm guessing if you're watching this now live on YouTube, you're probably already subscribed. But if you just come across this video on YouTube, make sure you do subscribe, because on the 13th of December, we will have Dash Core Group CEO Ryan Taylor on. And if he is prepared and willing and he has the information at hand at that stage, that'll be the following week after the open house event, which is happening on the 7th of December in Arizona at Skysong. So there may be more information to discuss then. So Ryan will be on the podcast, and if he's open to talking about it and has the information at hand, we can learn a lot more about it. The podcast for next Friday, which will be December the 6th. Joel, I think we have another special guest lined up.
Yes, let me make sure, because there's a couple that we've been talking about. There's a couple that actually I reached out to today that couldn't make it today but want to do it other times. Probably everyone's favorite Naomi Brockwell could be on. At least she will be on at some point in the future. And then also Desiree, known as Crypto Ramble, wants to be on at some point as well. So we'll see where that fits. But we should have a good solid bit planned out. Now, if you have not noticed, so today is Friday, as it were, and guess what? 8 days from now, not the 6th, but the 7th, open house, Scottsdale, Arizona. The revealing is healing. The revealing of EvoNet, of Dash platform, is coming. It's going to be great. We're going to finally see what this #WhenEvo. Well, now we're going to get to see it all. We're going to see what it's composed of. We're going to get to see how we can start building things on top of that in the interim before it's released on mainnet. We're going to basically see what the future looks like. So be there.
Excellent. And there is a meetup.com link. If you go to blog.dash.org, there's a blog post that has a link to that, so you can see who's there. It's got the information, the address, who's attending, a bit more information. I think it's going from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. So it's by ASU, Arizona, Phoenix. Yeah, definitely go check it out. But if you can't attend, there'll be a live stream as well. So yeah, we're all excited.
The day before there will be a podcast, and it'll be fun.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Right. Okay, so before I hand over to Joel to wrap up, I just want to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to Kodaxx for coming on the podcast again. I'm really excited and happy that you are a diff supervisor. I do think you do bring something unique to the table. And when it comes to development opportunities, I think your expertise and be able to value things up and see it from that different angle really does provide a special ability to the diff that I think we probably was lacking, if I'm honest. So I'm happy about that. If people want to learn about the diff, you can go to dashinvest.org. That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. On Twitter, yourself, you are at Kodaxx Dev, Kodaxx with 2 X's, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you're also on the Dash Talk Discord as Kodaxx, just Kodaxx.
Yep, that's right. I'm going to pop by your guys' podcast I always watch, but I'm just going to like randomly show up on here whenever I can.
Excellent. Cool.
Sounds good to me.
Right. So thanks, Kodaxx, for coming on, and I'll pass over to Joel to take us out.
Yeah, so if you liked what you saw here, make sure to comment, like, subscribe, and share. Get this reach out because we want to have lots of people watching this stuff. Especially if you enjoy what you see here, make sure you get it all over the place. And now it's time for that special magical moment called the after party. That's French for after party, which basically is just like this, except instead of 3 of us, there's as many as you want, 4 as late as you want, just chatting, not on the record because, we wouldn't want some of that stuff to go out to the general public. Just having a good time chatting, grab a brew, just chat with your Dashy friends, say hi to new people. And that is going to be, by invite only. But the way you get the invite is you go to the Dash Talk Discord, link staydashy.com, boom, right there in live chat. You go there, start asking around for the after party. Someone will send you a link, and please be ready to have your camera on and your microphone on, or just your microphone, because don't just be like turning it on and then you have no clothes on, or like confused. Oh, I didn't know. Just make sure you're ready, because that's what it is. It's, as I said, like this, as in you're talking to people over the internet. Be prepared for that. It's going to be
like talking from experience there.
Not from my personal experience. I wasn't the culprit.
Excellent. Well, this was episode... God, what episode are we on now? This was episode 132. Wow.
Oh, no.
Man. So many. But they're all been great. So... thank you for watching. I hope you found this to be informative. There will be the podcast link shared on dashnews.org tomorrow. Please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the... Oh, no, it doesn't work. The bottle's not open. Click the notification bell if you want to be alerted about future video content on dashnews.org. There we go. The notification bell. And that'd be excellent. I hope you all have a Dash-tastic weekend. Stay positive. Stay humble. But most importantly, stay dashy. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye, guys.